In a word, it's chaos.
You'll have to see it to believe it. Whoever said that must have been talking about Talladega. It's a place where chaos mixes with speed, where a town turns into a city, and a weekend becomes a lifetime of memories. It's a tradition like no other.
What a wild finish.
And a track like no other. And after it's all over, you still don't believe it ever happened. Get your tickets now at TalladegaSuperspeedway.com.
Roll Tide and welcome to this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. This is Roger Hoover. Great to be with you once again here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network as we get ready for Game 3, Alabama against ULM. As you can see today, we have a very busy show coming up. We'll start by hearing from the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, with Coach's Checklist, and then we'll have a one-on-one conversation with Alabama running back Jahmyr Gibbs, as we always talk one-on-one with Crimson Tide football players all throughout the season on Crimson Drive, and this week it's Jahmyr Gibbs. We'll also talk to Chris Stewart, who of course is filling in for Eli Gold as the host of Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show, plus calling Alabama football. We'll visit with him about Crimson Tide football, as well as Taylor Zarzour. He'll be on the play-by-play mic for the SEC Network coming up on Saturday, so we'll get his thoughts on Alabama against ULM, and then it'll be time for the other booth as Mike Hammett, the voice of the Warhawks, will give us a really detailed breakdown of Terry Bowden's team as they get ready to face Alabama on Saturday. Then finally, we'll be joined by one of our good friends and new partners with the Crimson Tide Sports Network, LifeBrand's founder and CEO TJ Colaiezzi, telling us all about LifeBrand and the new partnership with Alabama Athletics. So that's a rundown of everything coming up on Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. And as we go through our headlines today, it's all presented by RJ Young. RJ Young is the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive. They've given us this smart board, and you're going to see how interactive it can be as we start to go through today's headlines. We will first talk about the Crimson Tide football team, as this week we get ready for Alabama against ULM starting at 3 o'clock at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Our radio coverage will begin at noon across the network as, of course, the Crimson Tide lead the series 2-1. You probably remember the one back in 2007, a win for ULM. But the last time these teams played, Alabama got the victory, what turned out to be a national championship season back in 2015. It'll also be the first and gold awareness game, as well as Alabama will recognize teachers. You'll hear more about that from Coach Saban coming up, so we're glad to have all of that coming up. And then a reminder as well, next week against Vanderbilt will be a 6:30 start time. Radio start time will be at 3:30 for the Crimson Tide and the Commodores. Tonight, Alabama soccer. Everybody in town's fired up for this matchup between the Crimson Tide and the 4th-ranked South Carolina Gamecocks. That is at 6 p.m. It will be televised by the SEC Network. Alabama up to number 11 in the rankings. It's the best in school history. So with that, along with South Carolina's ranking at number 4, you have the first top 12 matchup ever in Tuscaloosa coming up in soccer tonight. So best of luck to Wes Hart and the Crimson Tide soccer team. Coming up on Sunday, they will round out non-conference play by taking on Chattanooga at 6 p.m., also in Tuscaloosa. Final few notes for Crimson Tide Athletics. Now we know the full schedule for Nate Oates and the men's basketball team starting on November 7th against Longwood, and we know all the SEC dates as well. So that's been announced along with women's basketball. The full schedules are available on RolledTide.com. Another note, the baseball team yesterday learned their SEC schedule. Don't have the non-conference schedule yet, but we also know who Brad Bohannon's team will face in SEC baseball. So that's also at RolledTide.com. Women's golf team started the season at the Annika Intercollegiate, ended up finishing 11th in the event. Benedetta Moresco, who's been a guest on the show before, turned out to be the highest finisher for the Crimson Tide in that event at 4 over par. Speaking of schedules, now we know gymnastics as well. They'll be home for the 2023 schedule that was just released on RolledTide.com. And then the Crimson Tide volleyball team, after going 1-2 this past weekend in Muncie, Indiana, the Ball State tournament, now they're going to Fort Worth, Texas for the TCU tournament, the Horned Frog Invitational. So some big matchups coming up for Alabama volleyball this weekend, once again in Texas. As we start getting ready for Alabama against ULM in football, we want to hear from the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban. He met with the media on Wednesday night, had a really interesting press conference that went several different directions. We'll let you watch now. Head coach Nick Saban with Coach's Checklist.
I think the big focus this week, as I said earlier in the week, is continuing to be able to play hard, but play smart, play with more discipline, make good choices and decisions. Intelligence, intensity, sense of urgency, those things are really important, but you got to focus them in the right place in terms of what you need to do your job correctly. because that creates value for you, but it also creates value for the team. And I think one of the things that we're trying to get our players to understand is, there's a lot of emphasis on winning games, but true competitors really want to play to the best of their ability, try to dominate the competition, whoever it is. And I think that helps you play at a high standard all the time, which is, I think, something else that we need to stay focused on so we get more consistent in what we do. I'm happy that this is the 9th year that we're in curing kids' cancer. I think they've raised like $23 million since 2005, which is a real worthy cause and something that, we all support as much as possible. I know Ms. Terry's going to have her next Kids Teachers Excellence Award. We appreciate good teachers more than you know, and that's why we try to always recognize them. Good teachers help individuals at a young age find their passion, find their niche, find what they want to do in life. And it's not always one size fits all. And I think good teachers, teach individuals and find what they really need to do to help them be successful and have a successful life. So I think that's probably one of the most important things in our society and why we, try to do a really good job of supporting teacher excellence. Well, but that's your opinion on quality of opponent, all right? It's not mine. All right? I respect all the people that we play, and I respect winning and what you have to do to win, all right? So, and every player should not be focused on who they're playing against relative to their motivation, but every player should want to be the best player they can be. So why would it matter whether we're playing Texas or playing somebody else? That's how you get good. That's how you develop the right habits. That's how you're consistent. I've told you guys more than once, when I was in the NFL, I watched players, I didn't know who they were playing against. I was just evaluating them. So that means when we play a team that's not as good as somebody else, you don't play as good. So you let the opponent determine how you play. You let the score determine how you play. You determine where you're playing. All right, that determines how you play. So when you get evaluated, what's somebody think? Oh, this guy plays pretty good at home. I don't think we'll draft him. Does that make sense? So I respect what it takes to win. All right, didn't I say this on Monday? What does what's your favorite in a game mean when you're favored by 20 points and you lose? Like 2 teams did this week. What does it mean? It means the people favoring you either don't know what you're talking about or the players playing got affected by that. Neither one of them are good. I remember a lot of them, man. I can tell you every teacher I had in every grade. All right, because most of the time I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do, so I was always getting corrected, and all those corrections did make a difference. But Miss Helminski gave me a D in music for not standing up and singing, so that was probably the best thing I ever learned about the importance of education, because my dad made me turn my basketball uniform in, took me down in a coal mine, said this is where you're going to end up when you don't get an education. So I remember her. Miss Matthews was my senior English teacher, and she was a teacher that was a little bit like what I talked about earlier. She didn't teach everyone the same, and which I think is important because everybody has different interest and a passion, and we should bring that out in those people regardless what it is, so that they have a better chance to be successful in life. And those relationships are very beneficial. But I can name almost all my teachers. Miss Jones, 1st grade, Miss Carpenter, 2nd grade, Miss Hearn in 3rd grade. I can go through all of them. Miss Troxel in English class, where I couldn't get what you call verbs and all that. I couldn't get that right. I can still see her jumping me. So I remember Mr. Ezel giving me a whipping for doing something, and when I got a whipping when I got home. All right, so I got 2 whippings. I got the paddle in school, and then my dad got me at home. So all those things, I think, contributed to helping me better make better choices and decisions, in my life. I really like math. Ms. Turkovich was the best math teacher I ever had. So I can just go on and on and on with the teachers. And they all had a significant impact on my life, and I certainly appreciate them, more than they know.
And that was Coach's Checklist as Crimson Drive driven by NASCAR continues. And I want to remind you that the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs are returning to Alabama this fall. Don't miss out on the opportunity to see defending champ Bubba Wallace as he attempts to go back-to-back at Talladega Superspeedway on October 2nd. Tickets are on sale now at TalladagaSuperspeedway.com. If you can't make it to the track, tune in to the race on NBC at 1 p.m. Central on October 2nd. Let's see, in kindergarten, I had Miss Easley, Mrs. Fletcher in first grade. Second grade was Miss Cornelius. Third grade, Miss Ashton. Fourth grade, Mr. Estes. Fifth grade, Mr. Tynes. I will stop right there. I'm kind of like Coach Saban. I can remember all my teachers, and it's great that we're going to salute them coming up this Saturday at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Someone else we're going to salute at Bryant-Denny Stadium on Saturday is running back Jahmyr Gibbs. He had a great performance against Texas, caught the go-ahead touchdown with 8.5 minutes left to go in the game. Here's our one-on-one conversation with Jahmyr Gibbs from earlier this week. First of all, we've got to talk about the touchdown. Alabama was trailing 16-10. What can you tell us about the play that put the Tide over the top?
I mean, I just ran a little hitch route. I seen Bryce scramble out. We always practice scramble drill, so I was pretty used to it. I saw him roll out to the right, but I was already on the right side. I mean, left side. He rolled out to the left, and then I just looked and found somewhere like an open spot where he could throw the ball, and he just hit me, and that was it.
Certainly a good moment for the Crimson Tide. Do you like being a pass catcher as well as a running back?
Yeah, it shows my skill set. I could do a lot of things well in that little I don't know the word, in the receiver position, I guess. Yeah. Absolutely.
And what can you tell us? I mean, the offense had a tough time stringing together a long drive, but what changed on that drive where Bryce was able to lead you guys down the field and the field goal as well?
Yeah, 2 minute. We practice 2 minute every day, so it was nothing new. We were prepared for it. We knew what it was when we came in, so we wasn't stressing over it. Like, we knew how to overcome it.
You probably heard that Bryce was pretty calm under pressure in moments last year. Did you get to see that this past Saturday?
Yeah, he was laughing. I was like, what are we laughing for? But I see why now. But yeah, it was. It's crazy how calm he is in the pocket and how calm he is with us. Even like when stuff's not going well as a quarterback, he knows how to lead the team and helps us win games.
How have you liked the transition to Alabama so far?
It's been great. I love it. I love it here.
And of course, you got to play in Bryant-Denny Stadium a couple weeks ago against Utah State. You fired up to be back inside Bryant-Denny against ULM this week?
Yeah. It was a great environment being here. Just can't wait to go back.
Well, Jahmyr, we're excited to see you again at Bryant-Denny Stadium against ULM on Saturday. Thank you for joining us. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
We appreciate Jahmyr Gibbs for joining us earlier in the week on Tuesday's Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. We had a great conversation as well with DeMarco Helms. That's on demand from our Tuesday show as well as on the Alabama Insider podcast. Of course, this is one of two shows we have coming up across the network. Tonight at 6:30, we will have Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show from Baumhower's Victory Grill in Tuscaloosa, as Chris Stewart will host the show, filling in for Eli Gold at Like He's Calling Football. And Chris is joining us all throughout the season here on Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR, as we kind of check in with him to see what he's thinking about Crimson Tide football as we get ready for week 3 of this season. Chris, it's great to see you after a frenzied trip to Austin. Of course, you went by car, I went by plane, but either way we got there, we came out with a victory, and that was certainly good to see.
We didn't have trains, but we did have planes and automobiles, and there was no Steve Martin sighting, but it was a good trip. I got a chance to visit with some folks that are well known and respected by Alabama fans. Our former head baseball coach and longtime assistant, Mitch Gaspard, is now in Ruston, and I stopped on the way out to and said hello to him, and then got to have dinner with one of my favorite people and an Alabama legend as well, and in Wendell Hudson and his wife Belinda there in Waco, and so it was a long trip, long couple of days to get there, but I really enjoyed it, and it made the trip back a lot more enjoyable. The fact that it finished on Saturday the way it did.
It certainly did. A dramatic finish for the Crimson Tide. The go-ahead touchdown to Jahmyr Gibbs, as well as the game-winning field goals that turned out by Will Reichert. And for you on the call, filling in for Eli, just what were those moments like for you in the booth?
Nerve-wracking, because I know I'm going to get blamed for it if it doesn't go well. Eli would have never lost that game. No, I was happy that Alabama got it done. I wasn't shocked that Texas made the field goal, especially given the last name of the kid that made it for them. You just kind of knew that was going to line up to not go right. But again, amazed at just how poised and talented and brilliant in so many ways Bryce Young is to engineer another 2-minute, actually less than 2-minute drive the way he did. The game management of Coach Saban to use the 2 timeouts, but save one in the hip pocket defensively before Texas kicked the field goal. Really, really interesting to watch. And again, just I wasn't stunned at all that they were able to put the drive together they did to get the win, but it felt a whole lot better when that thing went through the uprights. And then when the catch was made by Texas and you see triple zeros on the clock, that made it a whole lot better.
Good moment for Alabama, improving to 2-0 on the season. And I mentioned you're filling in for Eli. I do have to ask as well. Eli made a surprise appearance on our pregame show this past Saturday. Just what was it like catching up with him for the first time on the air in quite a while?
Yeah, and that's the key. You know, we've been keeping in touch with him and talking to him, but I think for the audience to hear him, to hear his voice, to hear him sound as good as he did was in visiting with a lot of people in the last few days, encouraging and uplifting for everybody to hear him and hear in his own words that progress is being made and hopefully back very soon.
Certainly rooting for that. As now we turn the page to Alabama's 3rd game of the season, and it's against ULM. And is it still too soon to talk about that 2007 game between the Warhawks and the Crimson Tide?
You know, I visited with a member of their crew earlier and in recording something for their pregame show, and that was naturally brought up. And I said, taking nothing away from that Warhawk team on that particular day, but this program from Alabama is in a little bit better shape now, 15 plus years into Nick Saban's tenure, than it was a few months into his tenure. It's in a different spot, which doesn't mean that they can't catch lightning in a bottle. And Alabama plays below its capability, and some bad stuff can happen. But no, I haven't forgotten that. I was doing the play-by-play on the pay-per-view that particular day. And there was actually a clip of that game used. Somebody did a documentary on the process in the early years of Coach Saban at Alabama. They did it. It's more than 10 years ago, but a buddy of mine did it. And he said, "Hey, we used your call on that." I said, "Man, I feel like that means I played a villain in a movie for the first time," because it wasn't a lot of fun, obviously. But what was less fun, as you can well attest, I was doing the post-game show at that time on the radio network, and you can imagine how much fun that was to take those calls after a loss to Monroe.
I can definitely relate. Thankfully, not
Yes.
to Monroe, but
No, you can't. No, you can't, partner. I'm just telling you right now.
Hey,
You got a
doing
good
after a
time.
national championship game loss is tough too. But I know it's a different
Not
level with
fun.
Monroe.
You're exactly right.
Well, a lot for the Crimson Tide to be proud of from the win against Texas. Also, a lot to clean up. Just what do you feel like the focus is going to be for Alabama on Saturday?
I think you hit the nail on the head. It is cleaning up mistakes, not making the penalties like they did, making sure that you play a clean game in that regard and penalty free or as close as possible. Continuing to develop and build as an offensive line, which was under attack a good bit of the day on Saturday by Texas, but I think a lot of the credit goes to them. That's a young group, but it's a talented group that they have and created issues. And I think I don't think it's a talent issue. I think it's a timing, chemistry issue that is going to just improve as we go week by week. I'm not concerned. Maybe that's ignorance on my part, but I'm not concerned with the offensive line because I believe it's going to develop and get better as we go forward. But it's a big opportunity to show improvement Saturday against a Louisiana Monroe squad that probably lies somewhere in between the challenge we got from Utah State and Texas. I don't know where they would fall on that scale further towards one or the other, but I think we should and will see a much cleaner, much better performance overall in this game from Alabama.
It's a home weekend. That's always special in Tuscaloosa, always special as well to have Thursday night Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show from Baumhower's in Tuscaloosa. Just what can you tell us about what's ahead on the show Thursday night?
Well, I'm going to turn the tables on you. I was anticipating this question. This is normally where you're asking me about the conversation, since you're the one that actually did the interview with Jay Sewell, and that will be airing in the first 30 minutes. You tell our audience what we'll hear from the Alabama golf coach.
Yeah, fun conversation with Coach Sewell that we recorded earlier in the week. He has some travel as they get ready for a tournament at Olympia Fields, a place that has hosted some majors recently. He and the Crimson Tide are really fired up for that trip after last week at the Duke tournament, winning the Rod Myers Invitational. Cannon Claycomb was the medalist. So a lot of good things for Alabama golf to catch up with our good friend Jay Sewell about.
So that's the first half hour. And then we will have the final hour, of course, which becomes the Nick Saban Show and Coach breaking down things. I'm sure there'll be a question or two about Texas, but his focus will be on this one against ULM and the Warhawks. And mostly, as he pointed out in his press conference on Monday, his focus is on Alabama. It's not the opponent. And the truth is, that's the way he approaches it, whether it's the Warhawks or the Longhorns. It's about his team and what they're doing. And that's where I think a lot of the conversation will be.
We look forward to it. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Roll Tide.
My pleasure. Roll Tide, buddy.
You'll have to see it to believe it. Whoever said that must have been talking about Talladega. It's a place where chaos mixes with speed, where a town turns into a city, and a weekend becomes a lifetime of memories. Get your tickets now at TalladegaSuperspeedway.com.
Always good to visit with Chris Stewart. Hope you can join him as well as Coach Saban coming up later tonight for Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show. And of course, he's calling Alabama against ULM on the Crimson Tide Sports Network, filling in for Eli Gold. Somebody else that'll be calling the game on Saturday. We'll actually hear from two more of them coming up the rest of this show. But first and foremost, we'll hear from Taylor Zarzour of the SEC Network, as he'll have the television call for this game. The first time he's gotten to see the Crimson Tide this season. Here's our conversation on not just Alabama, but taking a big look at college football as well with Taylor Zarzour. How has the start to college football season been for you?
It's been fun. I've had a chance to see Ole Miss a couple weeks ago. They have a quarterback battle going on right now between two players, Jackson Dart and Luke Altmaier, trying to replace Matt Corral from last year. So it's always fun to get to go to Oxford. And last week, we were between the hedges to see the Georgia Bulldogs shut out the Samford Bulldogs. And Georgia, of course, is now number one in the country again, as Alabama's been moved down to number two. And it really is remarkable, Roger, to see how big of an impact Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide have had on Kirby Smart's program. They obviously won the national championship last year, and they're talking constantly about playing to a standard. Doesn't that sound familiar to you? There's a lot of people that used to be on that Alabama staff that are now on the Georgia staff. So I don't think there's any question where the blueprint for success comes from these days, and that's from Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, sticking with Georgia for a moment, since you just called their last game, we heard all offseason, could they be able to reload on defense with all the players they lost to the NFL draft? Just when you got to see them in person, how did their defense look?
It looked terrific. I would say it's a little further along than I expected. Now, of course, Samford, no disrespect to Chris Hatcher and the Bulldogs there in Birmingham, but you knew that wasn't going to be much of a test. I think what they did to Oregon in the week one matchup in Atlanta was eerily similar to what we've seen the Crimson Tide teams do on neutral fields in Atlanta or Orlando or Dallas through the years, blowing out a good opponent in week one. So I was really impressed by the 8 players that weren't starters last year that have come in and played to the same standard that historically great defense that Georgia had last year was able to accomplish. I look at Georgia's schedule and I don't see them having a real threat of losing until they get maybe to late October against Florida, or maybe even into November against Tennessee or Mississippi State or Kentucky. I think I'd be shocked if this team isn't in Atlanta representing the East in the championship game. I would say, though, Roger, I think the strength of their team this year is going to be their offense. Stetson Bennett looks terrific. They have a lot of options at wide receiver and in the backfield. I think that's part of the reason why Jermaine Burton plays for the Crimson Tide instead of playing for the Bulldogs.
Well, now as you get ready for Alabama against ULM this Saturday, just when you look back at the first 2 games for the Crimson Tide, what do you feel like we've learned about this team that maybe we didn't know leading into this season?
Yeah, I think that we know that we already knew that Bryce Young is the first person you would want to pick if you have to come from behind and win a football game. We've already seen that in Auburn, Alabama last year and in a couple other different spots, and certainly saw it again in Austin, Texas. I still think that this team is trying to establish its identity on both sides of the football, especially from a leadership standpoint. I was a bit surprised, I think, like all of us were, by the penalties we saw in the first three quarters. Impressive, though, that they didn't have any when the game was on the line in the fourth quarter. I still think that the attention to detail is probably not as far along as what Coach Saban would like, and I'm a little surprised by that through the first 2 weeks. But I would remind all Alabama fans that we are very early in the season and that we are going to have some twists and turns. I was visiting with Matt Stinchcomb, who's the analyst that I've been working with the last 5 years, whose opinion I think carries a lot of weight. And I know Coach Saban has a lot of respect for Stinch. He was saying he didn't think that there are as many problems with the offensive line in terms of protection breakdowns as maybe what the fan might think through the first couple of weeks. There was maybe a couple of examples during the Texas game, but he sees a tremendous amount of talent on that offensive line. And with 3 returning starters, I would agree with that. I think establishing who the running back is going to be throughout the season, Roger, is the biggest thing that I would look for. Is it going to be Gibbs? Is it going to be McClellan or Williams, or a combination of all 3? And then the other thing is who the top receiver is going to be. I realize that you replaced 2 of the best receivers in all of college football from last season, but I'm wondering, as I mentioned earlier, is Jermaine Burton going to be that person, or is it going to be someone else that steps up and all of a sudden turns into a true threat for the Crimson Tide at receiver? I think that those things are going to happen, and they may happen as early as Saturday against Louisiana Monroe. But I think the fact that they haven't happened yet may be just a bit surprising.
Any big question marks on Alabama's defense leading into this game?
Not necessarily for me. I think that getting to the quarterback, we've seen Will Anderson have tremendous success doing that, obviously, the last couple of years. And Turner, I think, is a really good pass rusher as well. I think that covering the entire field, we saw that was a bit of an issue against Texas. I think getting to the quarterback, not just with 1 or 2 guys, but maybe 3 or 4 different players, I think would be the one thing I would look for as Alabama plays this game Saturday, plays Vanderbilt the following week. Are they able to get pressure with more than just those 2 guys? To me, that'll be a really big key, because you can't run against Alabama. We've seen that statistically showcase itself in the first couple of weeks. The one thing you have been able to do to some degree, especially the better teams, is throw against Alabama if you have time. And I know that Coach Saban and Coach Golding, I'm sure, are working on correcting that, and I would expect that to change in the weeks to come.
So this week it's Alabama against ULM, and we realize it's still pretty early in the week as we record this interview, but what have you learned about the Warhawks and the team that Terry Bowden is bringing to Tuscaloosa this week?
I tell you what, he's done a really good job of building a program that now has a chance to be a bowl-eligible team, taking this program from, I think, the worst, maybe in all of FBS football, to a program that I think will have a real chance to get to a bowl game by the end of this year, or certainly by next year. The one thing to remember, though, is the Sun Belt is for real when it comes to the group of 5. The American Conference is seen as the cream of the crop in the group of 5, but I don't think the Sun Belt is very far behind, if at all. You certainly look at what happened last weekend with Appalachian State going to Texas A&M and winning, and Marshall also coming out victorious. Coach Saban has already talked about that, and I think he made a really good point in his Monday press conference. You know, bringing up what Louisiana Monroe did to Alabama 15 years ago, I don't know that that really resonates with the current Alabama players. What happened to Texas A&M last week, I think, has a much better chance of getting across to the current players to show them, hey, listen, the team that beat you last year, they just lost to a team in this same conference. You know, teams that are competing against Louisiana Monroe each week are winning against SEC competition. That would get my antenna up if I'm a player a little bit more than what happened 15 years ago. And I think that Louisiana Monroe, rather, is going to have Alabama's full attention this Saturday.
Well, of course, fans that are watching on the SEC Network will have your full attention. They'll be paying attention to you along with Matt Stinchcomb and your reporter, Alyssa Lang. Just what can you tell us about your broadcast team and the kind of fun you guys have as you get to call some of the great SEC games each and every week?
Well, we're just incredible friends, and we've been working together now for 5 years. We love traveling together. We have a great staff. We've got a spotter, Russ Moore, who was in the Alabama band 30 years ago. When they won a national championship, he was in the stands in the Superdome. So he's a big Bama guy. So I know he's excited to get home. Kevin Maloney's our statistician, and he does a terrific job. And the five of us kind of stay together each week and always go to dinner. And we're excited about being in Tuscaloosa. Although I'll have to tell you that Alyssa is not with us. She is not with us this weekend. So Coley Harvey is going to be with us instead, and he will be on the sidelines, but we'll be excited to have him this weekend. But we love traveling together, Roger. We just, who you work with in life, I think, is a big key. And I'm incredibly blessed to work with some people that are such terrific friends. We always love our visits to T-Town. I'm from Mobile. A lot of my family went to school at Alabama. So it really does. I live in Charlotte now. So anytime I get to come anywhere back in the state of Alabama, it feels like coming home. So I'm excited to get back. And I hear a rumor that a new restaurant/hotel is opening this weekend that Coach Saban has a bit to do with. So we might have to do a little research for our broadcast come this Saturday.
That's an excellent tease for the show you guys are going to have on Saturday. Taylor Zarzour, thank you so much for joining us here on the network. Safe travels to Alabama coming up this weekend. Look forward to seeing you on Saturday. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Good to visit with Taylor Zarzour, as again, he'll be on the SEC Network call coming up on Saturday for Alabama against ULM. We've heard from him and Chris Stewart again, who's calling the game for us on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Now we'll go down the hall to the other booth, and that's the ULM broadcast booth. Mike Hammett is the voice of the Warhawks, and it's time for him to give us a detailed scouting report on ULM heading into this Saturday. Mike, I'm sure as you get ready for this game, so many people are talking about 2007. Just how often does that game come up down in Monroe, Louisiana?
It comes up even in years we don't play Alabama. So it comes up quite a bit anyway. And folks are still pretty proud of that one. And I mean, as it's turned out with what Nick Saban's done there, I think it should. I mean, it is such a great achievement. And, that's one of the hallmark victories of this program, that and beating Arkansas when they were ranked 8th to start off the 2012 season, the shock in Little Rock, and then the 1987 1AA national championship. Those are probably right there the three biggest wins in program history for ULM. So, it's already been talked about a lot this week. I don't know that a lot of folks are anticipating a repeat Saturday, but I think folks, they're hopeful anyway that maybe something can happen. So, I've seen all the pictures, all the videos, all the posts again. Everybody's it's all out there again this week for sure.
Yeah, even Nick Saban brought it up in his Monday press conference. He certainly remembers that maybe the players on Alabama's roster and ULM's roster don't remember him, but he certainly does. And now we start to get ready for this matchup in 2022. And even though it wasn't necessarily the Alabama upset win for ULM last week, it was good to see the first win of the season against Nichols. Just what can you tell us about this past Saturday?
I think it was a bit of nervousness through the first quarter anyway. We know Nichols in this state. I mean, they have over 100 Louisiana players on their roster. They're all mostly from the river parishes around New Orleans and Baton Rouge. And they just have this hard-nosed edge to them. They play with a chip on their shoulder. We knew they weren't going to back down. And so they came in here and, led by a touchdown after a quarter. The offense was sputtering a little bit. The offense didn't play particularly well at Texas, but again, being week one, you don't know, is it just our offense isn't that good, or is Texas's defense really good? And I think we found out, Texas defense is pretty darn good. And so the offense finally got rolling there in the second quarter, got a big catch and run from All Red Luke to get the Warhawks down to the goal line, punched it in the next play. And from there, they took advantage of a couple Nichols mistakes, got a big interception from Tristan Driggers, a new linebacker just transferred in from Kilgore College in the offseason, and he's had 2 picks in 2 weeks. Then you get a big shank on a punt right before halftime and go punch it in again. And for the first time since really 2018, when ULM went 6-6 and didn't make a bowl game because all the spots got filled up and they got left behind, that was really the first time we saw the Warhawks pull away in a game, and be able to get some of the bench and some of the depth in a good situation anyway, where you're up big, the game's in hand. And so a lot of guys got some playing time. Good to see Chandler Rogers stay efficient, 20 of 25 passing. He's completing over 75% of his passes so far since winning the starting job this fall, beating out Jahmyr Wright. They're both run pass guys, pretty similar guys. So if Rogers has to leave the game, Jahmyr Wright can step right in and nothing changes with the offense. A lot of depth at running back this year. Andrew Henry and Malik Jackson run 1A, 1B, really. But then the wide receiving core, too. I mean, you bring back 10 of your top 11 pass catchers from last year and add in a couple of guys like Tyrone Howell and Bugs Mortimer still getting incorporated into things after being a late add in fall camp. That's a lot of mouths to feed, but they're finally getting acclimated, figuring out how that can all work. The defense, they felt like the front seven was their strength. Secondary was maybe a bit hit or miss coming in, and they've done fairly well through 2 weeks. So again, it's a different level of competition come Saturday coming to Alabama. Not anything we're going to see in the Sun Belt the rest of the way, but it's a good test, good place for these guys to get some experience, measure up against one of the nation's best, and we'll see how it goes and see what they can take away from it.
I have to imagine there's a lot of pride right now in the Sun Belt based on what happened this past weekend. Appalachian State beating Texas A&M, Marshall a huge win against Notre Dame. Just you got to be excited that Sun Belt football is just around the corner for you guys.
That's one thing coming into this Alabama matchup. Not only the Tide's close win over Texas and the battle to get that done, I'm sure has Coach Saban and the team's attention this week. But 3 teams had to pull upsets last week. So the Sun Belt made some headlines anyway. And the power is in the East in this new formed conference anyway. When you talk about App State, the tradition they've pretty much run things on the eastern half of the Sun Belt since they came into the league. For them to pull that upset, I don't know that it was so shocking for those of us within the Sun Belt because we know that program. To go to A&M and get that win, that's absolutely huge, though. It's a tough thing for anybody to do. Marshall going to Notre Dame, of course, Marshall's got that great history, and we knew they were a great addition to the league, and they go and get that. Georgia Southern winning at Nebraska is, something that I don't think a lot of us saw coming. Nebraska's obviously struggled a little bit, and Clay Helton has flipped that thing a little bit in Statesboro already in just a couple of games. That I think they're going to be a force. But then you throw in Coastal Carolina out east. James Madison isn't eligible for anything this year, but boy, they're coming on strong. They've had 2 blowout victories in their first 2 games as an FBS member. The West has been a little more wide open. That's where ULM is. The Cajuns have things going. The school that shall not be called what they want to be called by us here at ULM anyway. They've won 15 in a row, I believe, nation's longest winning streak. And, right now looking to find a way to shut that down here maybe next week when the Cajuns come to Monroe. But outside of them, I mean, the West is wide open. Butch Jones up at Arkansas State trying to get things going right now. Texas State has a 4th-year head coach. Troy and South Alabama, both with newer coaches there as well. And us with Coach Bowden in his 2nd year. I mean, and Southern Miss coming in too. I mean, really, you could argue any of us could win the West this year just because everybody's still building. The balance of power is in the East clearly in this conference, but we're excited to get it going because get through this first opening gauntlet anyway of Texas and Alabama with Nichols in the middle. Now we get into conference play at the Cajuns starting next week, and I think that's the focus. Get some good experience, hopefully get out of Bryant Denny without any major injuries Saturday, and get going with a big rivalry game next week.
Well, Terry Bowden, of course, has coached against Alabama before when he was Auburn's head coach. I had a chance to get to know him when he was a media member about 15 years ago. Just how much is he enjoying being back coaching at this level and really building up this ULM program?
He has said that this is the final challenge of his coaching career, that he has come here and he's not, if he got it rolling, he's not entertaining other offers. He wants to finish here in Monroe. And he knows the task he's taking on. He was actually courted for the job when it was open prior, when Matt Viator took over, that he was at Akron at that point, and he turned it down, wanted to stay put at Akron, but he was intrigued anyway. And so he's come here. He's brought some life to the program, a little bit of star power a year ago when you bring in Rich Rodriguez as your offensive coordinator, and got some folks excited. to the point that season ticket sales tripled this year at ULM, which is huge for this program, and still some way to go as far as season ticket sales are concerned for sure, but it's a big step in the right direction, getting people fired up in this region. He's really taken on this challenge. He's embraced it. He knows that things have changed. He claims, that's what he learned at Clemson, going there and being a GA and an analyst, and everything he did for Dabo Swinney at Clemson was learning how to still connect with this younger generation as he gets older and later into his career. How can he still connect over that 40-plus year age gap between himself and his players? And he picked up a lot. He brought a lot of young coaches with him, former players, GAs and whatnot that he met at Clemson, brought them here to ULM to try to help bridge that gap. And we've seen Coach Bowden. I don't know if you've seen the photos on social media. We have Gold Fridays here that he bought a bunch of gold stuff on Amazon and whatnot and wore it out to practice last year and surprised the guys. He dances in the locker rooms. The photos of him wearing gold, by the way, not Photoshop. That's 100% real if you go look it up. So he's really done a great job connecting with the guys and trying to inject life into this program where we're coming up on 30 years as an FBS program and one bowl game in those 30 years. I mean, it's a monumental task for sure, but he's up for it and trying to get it done.
Well, we'll look forward to having him and all of ULM in town in Tuscaloosa coming up this Saturday. Just Mike Hammett, thank you so much for your time giving us a breakdown of the Warhawks. We look forward to seeing you on Saturday. Thank you.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Great insight from Mike Hammett, the voice of ULM, as we get ready for Saturday's game between Alabama and ULM. Again, 3 p.m. is the kickoff. Our radio coverage will start at noon. And coming up this Saturday, this game is brought to you by LifeBrand. A lot of you may be saying, well, what exactly is LifeBrand? Well, we had a chance to catch up with the founder and the CEO of LifeBrand, TJ Colaiezzi, to tell us all about what LifeBrand is and how it can help you and how they're starting to help the Alabama Crimson Tide. Here's our conversation with TJ Colaiezzi from LifeBrand. TJ, roll tide. It's great to see you. We're glad that LifeBrand is now a part of the Crimson Tide Sports Network family. How's everything going?
Roll tide. Roger, happy to be here and talking with you guys today.
Yeah, we're thrilled LifeBrand is on board with Crimson Tide Sports Network and Alabama Athletics. And just first of all, tell us about LifeBrand and how this business got started.
Yeah, look, LifeBrand is here to help protect people from their social media. I think everybody says things at some point in their life, especially in those high school and college years that, might not reflect right on them when they get older, things that may be immature. And we're trying to help people find things from their past, remove it, but also to build a strong personal brand. We all have the ability to build a great brand through social media. And we're trying to help people get themselves an advantage over their competition when it comes to applying for jobs, getting into college, sports, anything they can do to help showcase their talents online in a good and positive manner.
Yeah, and for people who maybe have thousands of posts or thousands of tweets, how do you guys go about finding those areas where you want to clean things up and, again, make it as presentable as possible?
Yeah, we make it super easy. We use the power of artificial intelligence to go through, and in a matter of moments, we can scan every single comment, photo, post that you've ever put up since the inception of your account. We'll flag things that could be quote unquote potentially inappropriate, because at the end of the day, it's up to you if you want to delete something or not. We'll then list everything in one easy to follow format on your screen. Maybe you had 4,000 posts. We flag 80 that are deemed potentially inappropriate. And then you can just go right through and hit delete, ignore, delete, and remove the ones you want. You don't have to scroll through 10 years worth of posts. You don't have to, if it says that it was from June of 2012, go back and find it. You can delete it right from our platform. We're synced with Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, that we can remove those things. And, I think the thing that's most compelling, and I want all of your, listeners and viewers to realize, is the average user that goes through our platform deletes over 18 posts. I think that's just a staggering number. And look, these aren't bad people. I mean, these are people for Fortune 500 companies, pro sports teams, great college programs. The average person, though, deletes 18 posts. There are 18 things. It's like, you know what? I don't really need that on there anymore. I don't think it's necessarily harmful, but it's also not helping me build a great brand for myself.
And for a lot of our fans as well, who maybe are going through a job application process or up for anything in their life, they probably don't realize how much their own social media accounts are checked by prospective employees or people just in all walks of life, because our social media profiles are really checked thoroughly by people these days.
Roger, I'm so glad you said that. Studies by SHRM, the Society for Human Resources Management, Career, Indeed Builder. They've all done studies that show over 90% of employers snoop your social media during the hiring process. So I tell people all the time, people used to go to job interviews in a suit and tie and looking sharp to make a great first impression. That in-person interview is no longer the first impression. The first impression of you was made through your social media. That's the first thing that potential company is going to see about you. So what does your first impression look like to them?
And then how has LifeBrand started to work its way into the professional sports world and now collegiate sports with Alabama?
You know, I think with pro sports, with collegiate athletics, you know, students or pro athletes are in the public spotlight more so than the average company. And we work with other, you know, regular companies outside of the sports world, but with athletes being such, you know, in the forefront, it just made a lot of sense. We started working with a lot of pro sports teams. We did some really big corporate partnerships with some of the teams here out of Philadelphia and then strategically other places throughout the country. And, you know, we've been linked with, you know, former Heisman Trophy winner and, you know, Alabama's own Devontae Smith for about 2 years now. He's been an ambassador of ours, an equity holder. And he's somebody that's just always done and said the right things, has a great reputation, and is helping to spread that for us through other universities. But every university, once they see it, they know college kids are typically the ones that are the most prone to post things that years from now could be inappropriate. Parents clearly see the value in helping to protect their kids. I mean, look, if we're going to spend tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for a kid to go to college, ultimately to get a job, why not invest a handful of dollars to make sure their first impression on social media looks good?
That certainly sounds good. Again, we're big fans of Devontae Smith. I know you cheer for him with the Philadelphia Eagles. Are you enjoying getting to cheer for the Crimson Tide now as LifeBrand begins this partnership?
Yeah, we're super excited. We're going to have our team down there this Saturday, and we're really, really excited. We want everyone to look for us. We're happy to give people a chance to do free scans and see what's on their own social media. But I'm really excited to, you know, add Crimson Tide to our group of just amazing colleges and pro teams that we have the honor of helping protect.
Where can our fans go for more information, TJ?
Everybody can head right over to www.lifebrand.life. You can learn more about LifeBrand, but also we make a free scan available to everybody, similar to a free credit check. We'll let you for free scan your social media. It's, if anything, it's fun to see how many you might have. And then they can always go ahead and upgrade afterwards if they want to see all of them and unlock it so that they can delete them. But I encourage everybody, go get a free scan. What does it hurt?
TJ Colaiezzi, the founder and CEO of LifeBrand, again, a new partner with the Crimson Tide Sports Network and Alabama Athletics. TJ, just thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to having your team in Tuscaloosa this week. Roll Tide.
You got it. Roll Tide.
Fun conversation with TJ Colaiezzi. Again, make sure you download the LifeBrand app, and they're going to have some representatives, as he mentioned, here at Bryant-Denny Stadium coming up on Saturday to learn more about LifeBrand. Saturday, Alabama against ULM. That's what we're looking forward to, of course, here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network, as it turns out to be a very busy weekend across the network. So it's time to take a look at all of it, thanks to the Wickles Weekend Update, brought to you by Wickles Pickles. They are wickedly delicious. Find out more at wickelspickles.com as we take a look at what's coming up across the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Coming up later tonight, 6:30, Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show. Chris Stewart gave us a great preview of that show earlier in this episode of Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR, but make sure you join us then. Also, tomorrow, make sure you download the This Week on CTSN podcast. We'll have links to that on our Facebook and Twitter pages, and also it's available on the Alabama Insider podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Game day, Saturday, 3 p.m. kickoff against the Warhawks. We will go on the air at noon from Bryant-Denny Stadium for that ball game, and then on Sunday, you'll get to hear from the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban. Visit with Chris Stewart on the Nick Saban television show. Many stations around the state also have Tide TV this week around the Nick Saban show as well, so make sure you check that out, and both will be available on demand on the Alabama Athletics YouTube page. Then on Monday night, Corey Reamer and I will be with you from Baumhauer's Victory Grill in Vestavia Hills to take a look back at the ULM game with Crimson Tide Rewind. Start looking ahead as well to conference play beginning the next week against the Vanderbilt Commodores. But that is today's Wickles Pickles Weekend Update, brought to you by Wickles Pickles, wickedly delicious. And this, of course, has been Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. I want to remind you that the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs are returning to Talladega on October 2nd. Don't miss your chance to be a part of the best atmosphere in all of sports. Purchase your tickets today for the NASCAR Cup Series playoff race at TalladegaSuperspeedway.com. It's going to wrap up this edition of Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. We thank NASCAR for being such a great presenting sponsor of this show, as well as all the guests we've had on a very busy edition of the show today. Jahmyr Gibbs, running back for the Crimson Tide, joined us, as well as Chris Stewart, previewing Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show, Mike Hammett of ULM, Taylor Zarzour of the SEC Network, and then a great conversation with TJ Colaiezzi as well from LifeBrand to round out the show. But it's been a very busy edition of this show that we have twice a week for you all throughout college football season, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. Central, right back here on the CTSN social media outlets. Got to say a big thank you to Ethan Carabin, our producer, for putting this show together, and thanks to all of you for watching. For everybody at the Crimson Tide Sports Network, this is Roger Hoover saying thank you for watching Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. We'll see you Saturday at Bryant-Denny Stadium for Alabama against ULM. Roll Tide, everyone.